All right, this is the review for the end of the unit. This is something that we normally have you do on your own, and then we go over together in class. So I'm going to ask you to do that. Turn off the recording, go do this review, and then play the recording to see how you did and to find your mistakes and learn from them. All right, so the first one says graph the equation x squared plus x minus 6. So that means I need to get a table of values and copy the table. And we get -3, 0, -2, -4, -1, -6, 0, -6, 1, -4, and 2, 0. So in order to graph this, I have to show the table. I am noticing that my vertex is missing from my table. There is supposed to be an oddball point in here, and there's not. I do know that this parabola is symmetric, so my vertex has to happen halfway between the x values whose y's are duplicated. So it's going to happen at an x value of -1/2. In order to find the y value, I have to plug it into the equation. So y equals, hug that negative, -0.5 squared plus -0.5 minus 6. Type it into your calculator and you get -6.25. Now the Regents exam is going to expect to see the work that you have seen me write here. So when you plug that value in to find the y value, they totally expect to see that. All right, so over here, we need our axes. So that's the y. And contrary to what you might believe, you don't have to draw the x and y axis in the middle. Okay, you can draw them wherever you want. -3, 0, -2, -4, -1, -6, 1/2, -6.25. Remember, you have to graph that vertex. So if it doesn't show up in your table, you go find it. All right, draw some arrows, label it. So I'm going to call that equation A, and my graph is done. Okay, what is the axis of symmetry? They're asking you to name it. The axis of symmetry is the vertical line that cuts the parabola in half. It will always go through your vertex. So it is a vertical line, meaning it's a Vux line. So it's x equals the x of your vertex, which is x equals -0.5. Your vertex is the turning point. That's the one that we had to work to find. So -0.5 and -6.25. The roots are where it crosses the x-axis. Do not give the points, just give the x values of where it crosses, which is -3 and 2 are the roots. All right, number 2, so circle the widest parabola. There was a lesson that we skipped, which would talk about what the numbers do and how you can tell by looking. But quite honestly, folks, you guys have a graphing calculator. Type all 3 of them in and pay attention to the order in which it graphs. And the widest one is going to be this one. Okay, so you can type them in one at a time in the calculator, or put one into y1, one into y2, one into y3. It will graph them in order once. So pay attention to your graphs, and that last one that it draws is going to be your widest. All right, what would happen to the parabola if you change the a value to a negative number? Now remember, a is the number in front of the x squared. So just type that in your calculator and hit graph and see what happens. You get a nice happy parabola. Put a -2x squared in, and the rest of the question the same, and all of a sudden you get a nice sad parabola. So what happens is it flips the parabola upside down. Makes it a sad face. Okay, you can just test that in your calculator. All right, number 4, the height of a ball in feet can be found by that function. T is the elapsed time in seconds. Round all answers to the nearest tenth if necessary. Well, the first thing we're going to do is hope that all the answers show up in the table, and honestly, they're most likely to on a Regents exam anyway. So we're going to type our table in, or type our equation in, and go get the table, and copy down the table. So I have 0, 0, 164, 296, 396, 464, and 50. And I should be able to find most of my answers right off that table. All right, so at what time does it reach its maximum height? Uh-oh. So when you have a parabola, okay, this one is you throw a ball up. So you're throwing a ball up and it comes back down. So your maximum is your vertex. Your vertex is not in your table, so we need to go and find it. We know it's going to happen halfway between these two values because the 96s are the same. Halfway between 2 and 3 is 2.5. To find out this value, the y value that goes with it, we're going to plug in the 2.5 into the equation. So negative 16 times 2.5 squared plus 80 times 2.5. Let's go type that into the calculator. And it says 100. All right, so at what time? Time is always x, or the t in this case. So we need an x answer of the maximum height. Well, the x value of the vertex is 2.5, and we have to put labels on it, so 2.5 seconds. At what time does the ball hit the ground? Well, if you look at this little sketch up here, that wasn't very good. The ball starts on the ground, goes up in the air, and then when it hits over here, which is a root, the ball is on the ground again. So at what time? Time is an x value. When the y is 0, your height is 0. That means you're on the ground, so 5 seconds. At what time or times does the ball reach 96 feet? 96 feet is a height. That's a y value. So look at your table, and the 96 feet happens at 2 and 3 seconds. You need both answers. What is the ball's maximum height? So they're asking for a height. That's a y value, and we calculated it. The y value of our vertex was 100 feet. How high is the ball after 4 seconds? 4 seconds is an x value, so go look at your table where x is 4, and you find out that it's 46 feet in the air. Simplify the following. So this is using the prime factorization. 2 times 49. 49 is 7 times 7. Hockey stick. Make groups of 2. For every group of 2, 1 comes out. So a 7 comes out and joins the 5 that's already there by multiplying. 7 times 5 is 35. That 2 stays inside the radical. Over here, we're doing a cube root this time. We'll deal with that in a moment. 108 is 2 times 54. 2 times 27. Which is 3 times 9. Which is 3 times 3. A hockey stick. There's a group of 2s. Here's a group of 3. Oh, shoot. My bad. Sorry. We are doing cube root. See, I almost forgot. So if you have a cube root, you need groups of 3. So I have 3 3s, and that's the only group of 3 I've got. So a 3 comes on the outside. Now, as far as the x's and the y's, I've got 3 x's being multiplied. I've got 5 y's being multiplied. So I'm going to make groups of 3. And here's a group of 3. So I have an x coming out. I have a y coming out. So I have a 3xy on the outside. Don't forget to put your little 3 back for the cube root. I still have 2 2's in my hockey stick that I didn't cross off, so they multiply back together to get 4. The x's are all gone, but I got a couple y's sitting over there that didn't get crossed off, so I have a y squared inside my radical. All right. Solve number 7. So this is one of those shortcut problems where you only have an x squared. So you can use square roots instead of having to do quadratic formula or try to factor or whatever. Now it just said put the answer in simplest radical form. If you want to set it equal to 0 and do quadratic formula and solve it that way, that's absolutely fine and acceptable. But I'm going to do the shortcut. Since there's only an x squared, I can use the shortcut. So I'm going to move the 87, no, sorry. I'm going to move the 13 over. I'm going to get the x squared by itself. So I have 5x squared equal to 100. Then I have to divide by 5, because the x squared has to be all by itself. So I get x squared equals 20. And now that the x squared is by itself, I can square root both sides. So the square and the square root cancel out. Positive, negative. Now it said simplest radical form. I have to simplify. So over here, I'm going to break down the 20. 2 times 10, 2 times 5, hockey stick. I got a pair of 2's, so a 2 is going to come out, and a 5 is going to stay in. So my final answer is positive negative 2 root 5, which if you did the quadratic formula, you should end up with the same thing. You just might have a 0 in front. All right, number 8. Again, I see a package, a set of parentheses, a box being squared. So I only have one thing being squared. It's the box. I do not want to do double distribute it and make this into a really long problem. You can, but your chances of making a mistake go up highly. So we're going to do the shortcut. It says, get that box by itself, that package. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. X minus 1 squared is going to be equal to 16. And now that package is by itself, so I can square root both sides to get rid of the square. That leaves me with an x minus 1 equals a positive and negative. The square root of 16 is 4. So I don't have to simplify it. It just comes out to be a 4. Now that I don't have square roots left in my answer, I need to separate my answers. So x minus 1 could equal a positive 4. X minus 1 could equal a negative 4. So when I add 1 to both sides, x is 5. If I add 1 to both sides, x comes out to be negative 3. And here's my 2 answers. Now remember, these still make graphs of parabolas, and what you are doing right now is finding the roots of those parabolas. Okay. Number 9, solve by completing the square. Put your answer in simplest radical form. All right, so to complete the square, you are not allowed to have a number touching the squared term, so you want to divide everybody by 3. So x squared plus 8x minus 4 equals 0. And now we're ready to complete the square. That was just the prep work. So the constant has to be on the other side. X squared plus 8x equals 4. Off to the side, take half the b and square it. So take that 16 and add it to both sides. Clean up the right side. Factor the left side. That half b goes in, so x plus 4 is the only choice you have for factors. Now you have a package squared. So to get rid of the square, we square root both sides. That gives us x plus 4 equals positive negative square root of 20. It said simplest radical form, so over here on the side we're simplifying square root of 20. 2 times 10, 2 times 5, hockey stick. For every group of 2, 1 comes out, so you got a 2 on the out, so you got a 5 on the in, so x plus 4 is going to equal positive or negative 2 square root of 5. And then to get the x by itself, you subtract 4 from both sides. Remember, pretty numbers go first and ugly irrationals go second, and you now have it in simplified radical form. Okay, solve using quadratic formula. That's x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. In order to use quadratic formula, you have to set it equal to 0. So let's move this guy to the left. 9x squared minus 6x minus 11 equals 0. You do want them in order. So my a is 9. My b is negative 6. My c is negative 11. Plug everybody in. Negative 6 plus or minus square root. Hug that negative 6 and square it. Minus 4 times 9 times negative 11. All over 2 times 9. So clean up, x equals 6. We got to type that into our graphing calculator so we can see what's underneath the radical. And we get $432. And 2 times 9 is 18. So it said simplest radical form, so over here on the side, we're going to do our hockey stick stuff. 2 goes in 216 times, 2 times 108, 2 times 54, 2 times 27, 3 times 9, 3 times 3. All right, hockey stick. Groups of 2. Here's 2 2s, here's another 2 2s, here's 2 3s. All right, so a 2 comes out of the first group, 2 comes out of the second group, 3 comes out of the third group. Multiply them all together, and we end up with 12. And then we got one lonely little 3 that stays in. So, back to our problem. 6 plus or minus 12 root 3 all over 18. Draw your heart around the pretty numbers. And let's see, what goes into 6, 12, and 18? 6 goes into all of them, so 6 divided by 6 is 1, 12 divided by 6 is 2, 18 divided by 6 is 3. So our final answer is x equals 1 plus or minus 2 root 3 all over 3. And number 2 says, take your pick. Okay. Most of you guys are going to do quadratic. So let's subtract the 30. No, quadratic means we're ready to go. A is 2. B is negative 16. C is 30. For those of you who are wondering, your first step for completing the square would be to divide everybody by 2. You can divide everybody by 2 before you start quadratic formula as well, and then have smaller numbers to work with. That is perfectly okay, and you will get the same answers. All right, anyway, x equals negative 16 plus or minus b squared is negative 16 squared minus 4 times a times c, which is 30, all over 2 times 2. So positive 16 plus or minus, type it in here, and we get a 16 underneath the square root. 2 times 2 is 4. All right, well, I know what the square root of 16 is, so I am going to change that to a positive negative. Square root of 16 is just 4. No more radical left. Now that I don't have any radicals, I need to actually separate these two and come up with some pretty numbers. So 16 plus 4 divided by 4, 16 minus 4 divided by 4. Now remember, do the top first, then divide. So 16 plus 4 is 20. 20 divided by 4 means one of my answers is 5. 16 minus 4 is 12. 12 divided by 4 makes a 3. And remember, if you get nice pretty numbers that don't have any radicals, that means you could have also factored that problem. But our roots are 5 and 3. All right, find the axis of symmetry algebraically. Common question on the algebra regions. Formula that you need to memorize. X equals negative b over 2a. So my a is 3, my b is negative 4. All we got to do is plug them in. X equals negative 4 over 2 times 3. So that gives us 4 over 6. So x equals 4 over 6. It did not say we had to simplify it, so that works. If you did do a math frac, you would get 2/3. If you wanted to say x equals 0.6 repeating, that's fine too. Any of those answers is good, but you have to have the x equals. The axis of symmetry is a vertical line, a Vux line. It's got to say x equals, not just a number. All right, find the vertex algebraically. Well, in order to find the vertex, you need the axis of symmetry. So x equals negative b over 2a. A is negative 2, b is 6. Plug them in. So you get negative 6 over 2 times negative 2. Clean it up. Numerator is negative 6, denominator is negative 4. So when you divide that out, you get 1.5. If you want to leave it as a fraction 3 over 2, you can. No big deal, but I like decimals, are easier to type. Okay, that's the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry goes through your vertex, so you need the y value that goes with it, And if you have an equation and you know the x, you just plug it in to find the y. So negative 2, 1.5 squared plus 6 times 1.5 minus 7. So you have to write it down on your paper. Then you can type it in your calculator. That's how you show New York State that you're doing the work. And I got negative 2.5. So the vertex is 1.5, comma, negative 2.5. All right, that's the end of the review sheet. I hope you did well, and that sums up this unit.